Hi, everybody. It's Lisa again with English Literature 104. And in this PowerPoint, I'm going to go over assignment 3, which is poetry. In this essay, it's going to be at least 500 words, and you're going to be analyzing several poems that are going to have the same or a similar theme. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to discuss how the theme was presented. What was the form that they used? What was the word choices that they made? What was the tone that they had? How did the poem make you feel when you were reading it or after you were done reading it? You want to emphasize on the word choice and the tone in your analysis. Those are the main factors that we're looking. While we did not require additional chapters in your text that address these and the other poetic devices, I do recommend other chapters that provide an excellent resource to help you in expanding your analysis. If you select shorter poems, then more than two are required. Access to recordings of the poems that you are reading or others, okay, are here at that you can check them out here at this website. Part of your analysis can include the discussion of differences between the reading of the poem and listening to it also. You'd be surprised at how different it sounds when you're listening to it rather than reading it. We have suggested poems of the blind man and the elephant. He worried about it. The female species to an athlete dying young. You can pick whichever ones you wish. When you're analyzing a poem, it's not writing a summary like you would be in fiction. Analyzing the poem is interpreting what the author is telling the reader. The interpretation is going to include not just what the work means, but how did that author accomplish their purpose? So again, you want to pick several poems with the same or similar theme. You want to make sure that you read each poem several times because you want to make sure that you're grasping the theme on each one. What is the similarity? What is the author? What is each author trying to get the reader to understand, to feel, to think about? So when you're reading it, you're looking for clues. What is the theme of the poem? What is the poet trying to say? What is the poem about? What happens in the poem? Are there conflicts in the theme? Are they introduced? Are they resolved? Who is the speaker? What's the point of view of that speaker? Is this political? Is it physical? Is it social? Is it intellectual? What is the writing? What's the setting? What is the time and the place? How does the poet make sure to use a physical description so that the reader understands and can see or feel what they're trying to say? Does the poem create a mood? Are there any key statements or lines that indicate the meaning? Look to see if there's one key line or a symbol that is reoccurring that the author. How does the sound or language contribute to the poem's meaning? How does the rhythm affect what the poem is trying to convey? What kind of words are being used? Do the words have double meanings? Does the poem refer to a literary work, such as a biblical reference, maybe even a reference to another poem, another work? Is there historical, ideological, or cultural aspect? Does the poem refer to a world event, a specific period of time, maybe a race, a status, a gender, a social class? What are the basic ideas that are happening in the world? What are the human conditions? What are they experiencing? Love, hate, what is going on? What qualities or emotions does the poem evoke? How does the poem make you feel? Is there imagery being used? Do you have, sorry. Does the poem use a physical imagery or figures of speech, such as a metaphor. Poets use language to express or represent thoughts, their ideas, their feelings, their actions, experiences. What do you see when you read the poem? Imagery may involve, though, one or more senses: hearing, smell, thought, intellection. When analyzing a poem, you want to take note of the devices a poet is using to convey those meanings. What are they emphasizing? So, reading your poems. First, you want to read your poem silently. Get your gut reaction. Does it bring any memories to you? Maybe feelings? Okay, in the Vagabond song, the first impression might be one that brightly colored leaves edged on frost, or summer turning to fall. It may call up memories of time spent in the woods when the leaves were all changing. On your second read, and then you want to look more into the literal meaning. The Vagabond song, okay, the poet was witnessing the change from summer to fall. He feels like fall is the most captivating season, and it sets his blood going to think of the leaves changing. Then when you read it again for a third time, this is going to be a cognitive meaning. Meaning, like, think about when people use the word mother, for example. The dictionary is going to say it's a female parent. But when you hear the word mother, it might actually create emotional feelings for you. It paints a picture in your mind, right? You may think of love and security. You may think of your own mother. Okay, so words will have emotions and feelings. They create a cognitive feeling. So for Vagabond Song, the phrase like gypsy blood, obviously we're not talking about gypsy blood meaning the blood of someone who was of a Romanian descent, but the poem uses gypsy blood more as a wandering spirit. The poet may have their own permanent home and place to live, but when the fall season comes, suddenly he's restless. So, what's the symbolic meaning of the poem? Vagabond Song considers the word native. There is something in the autumn that is native to my blood. Native in this case does not mean that the speaker was born with autumn in his blood. It's just a symbolic representation that when fall comes, he becomes part of autumn. He feels alive. That's the time of year he loves most. For another example, consider the word light. It may not refer to literally the condition that means opposite of darkness. It's used to symbolize knowledge, truth, peace, joy, spirituality. So, in the Vagabond song, Carmen's purpose for writing is to celebrate a transition from summer to fall. He wants to express the feelings he gets when the leaves begin to change, and suddenly that restlessness grips him. You want to do these steps for all your poems and compare. You want to see what types of words that the poems are using. The simile or directly stated comparisons using words such as like or as, he fought like a lion. A metaphor is implied comparison that they're really not alike. All the words is, all the world is stage from Shakespeare. Personification ascribed human attributes to non-human objects. Meantime, the heaven wept upon our heads. You have sounds that sound like it's a sense, like crack, whiz, whoosh, sputter. Irony is expressed throughout the actual opposite of an intended meaning. Alliteration is repetition of the same constant sounds. Some sat, some stood, some slowly strayed. So you want to take notes. Okay, when you start reading them, you want to examine the title. Is it indicative of a conflict? Is it a human condition? Is it symbolic? Is it sarcastic, humorous, serious, descriptive? Okay, what do you think the author is trying to say? Why did they choose that? You want to read the poem and see what the indications are. What's the topic? What's the setting? What's the voice that the speaker's using? What are images that are evoked? Is there any historical or cultural link? You want to make sure you're studying the ending. Where has the poem taken you? Examine the poem. Is it organization? Is it the sequence? What's the tone? What is the attitude that the author has? Topic. Okay, this analysis is going to be at least 500 words. You're examining your title again as you're writing it. Is it indicative? Is there conflict? Again, same questions that you did when you were reading it. Now, when you're writing it, you're asking the same questions. Is it satire? Is it sarcastic, humorous, serious, descriptive? What's the meaning? What's the topic? And again, where did that poem take you? Make sure you're showing that the ending. You want to use a present tense when you're discussing works in literature, such as the character of Mrs. Mallard's husband is not developed. You're going to use past tense verbs only when discussing historical events. Avoid unnecessary plot summary. Okay, in this particular writing, your goal is to draw your conclusion about one or more works and support that conclusion. You need to supply pertinent details. What is the plot? Support that plot. How are you going to support the plot? How are you going to make sure that the reader understands what you're saying? Use literary terms accurately. For example, be careful not to confuse the narrator or the speaker with the author. Feelings or opinions expressed by a narrator or character do not necessarily represent those of the author. So you should not say in the poem's last stanza, Frost expresses his indecision when you mean that poem speaker is indecisive. Okay, just a few tips. You underline titles of novels and plays, place titles of short stories and poems in quotation marks. Okay, you're referring to authors as their full names. The first time you refer to them, such as Edgar Allan Poe, but then when you keep on, if you're writing from that point forward, you can just refer to him as Poe. Because it's not so because it is very simple, okay, to download documents. We sit here and tell you often, be very cautious. Make sure you know where you found the information. If you're using information from a source, that's 100% fine. Make sure it is in quotation marks. If you are using quotes, if you're quoting it specifically or word for word with in-text citations, if you are summarizing or paraphrasing, it doesn't need quotation marks, but it does need to have in-text citations, and it does have to have a works cited page at the end. Make sure that you always give credit where credit is due. Again, you're acknowledging the material and where it came from. Use MLA format. By this time, you should be familiar with MAL format. Please make sure you are familiar with MLA format in-text citations and the references, the works cited page at the end. Here are some ideas. Okay, set off quotations of 4 more lines. Okay, I would prefer that you do not use long quotes. One sentence quotes are good. I would prefer you to see you paraphrase more, and I would prefer to see that the quotes support the points that you are making. But here are a few of the suggestions for MLA format and how to use your quotes. Okay, everybody, I'm excited to see what you're writing.